Hey folks, welcome back to Sub2 Investor. My name is Hans, and in this episode I'll be walking through the numbers in detail on my 11th Subject to deal, which I ever closed and which I still hold to this day. We stand to make approximately $100,000 on this deal, if not possibly more. And we didn't have to do a ton of work, well, besides that whole nightmare squatter story from hell. Go back and watch that video if you haven't seen that one yet. But in this episode, I'm going to be breaking down all of the numbers in detail so that you can see how these deals actually play out in real life on paper. This is part of my real Sub2 deal breakdown playlist where I am just pulling back the veil so that you can see on the inside what these deals actually look like. Yes, it can be a lot of work and a lot of headache, but what's awesome is that over a short period of time, if you really dedicate yourself to this business model, you will be able to scale up a nice cash flowing portfolio. And this will enable you to quit your 9-to-5 job or just add additional income for you and your household. Whatever your goals are, I just really love this business model and am committed to it. And so I hope that these videos help you see what's possible in your own investing endeavors and motivate you to get going and start buying some properties. All right, so just a quick recap. This was a subject to deal, a house that we bought subject to the existing loan on the property. Now, when we bought it, the seller had just done a partial claim, I believe it was, on her loan because they were behind on mortgage payments. And so the lender took, I think it was about $5,000, put it as a second loan, non-interest bearing, on the back side of a second lien on the property. And then we came in and bought the property subject to both of those loans, right? The first lien and then that second loan, the partial claim. So we came in and bought the property. This was actually a manufactured house. First manufactured home I'd ever purchased. Was a little bit skeptical that it would be a desirable property, but it had a nice lot, had a lot of square footage, had some things going for it, was in a nice neighborhood for the area. So we bought it subject to. The seller had moved out of state and just wasn't able to make the payments any longer. And she was over leveraged on the house. So really an ideal scenario in a subject to. So again, we turned the property around, we cleaned it out a little bit and started marketing it remotely for a tenant buyer or a seller finance buyer. Now, I got that story a little out of order in my previous video, but basically after two debacles with squatters, we ended up just manning up and hiring a realtor so that we could have credibility and boots on the ground so that she could show the property for us to prospective tenant buyers and buyers. And that's eventually how we ended up getting rid of this property. All right, so if we take a look at this yellow column here, we'll just go through some numbers real quick. Our purchase price was $132,000. So that was the number reflected on the HUD or settlement statement. The loan balance in total was $124,211.79. So we'll call it $124,000. The partial claim was $5,000. The interest rate on the loan was 4.25%, so pretty good interest rate. The monthly payment on the loan was just over $800, $807 a month. No cash to seller on this deal given no equity, and the closing costs that we incurred were just over $1,000. And the total loan amount given the loan balance on the first loan and then the partial claim on the second was a grand total of $129,787. So we'll call that about $130,000 of debts on the property. Now I'm going to swing over here to my deal evaluator. And what's cool about the deal evaluator, which I built, is that you put the loan terms in on this first tab, but then you can click on the second tab and get the amortization schedule for the subject to loan, or if it's a seller finance note, then it'll spit out the amortization schedule for that loan as well. So you can take a look. Her loan began back in 2018. If you scroll down, here's just a standard amortization schedule. It goes for the 30-year term, so for the full 360 months of the loan until the loan is paid off and there's a $0 balance. So if you're doing these deals, what you might want to do is go to the month Let's just go to this month of this year. It's May. So let's go to May of 2024 and we can see what is owed on that loan. So as of this month, approximately $115,000 is left on that loan. It's really nice to have this deal evaluator. Everything is really kept in order for you. And that's why I like to use this thing. I use it all the time on all of my deals and all of my prospect deals as I'm making offers. So we turned around and found a buyer. They ended up wanting to purchase it on a contract for deed and had a decent sized little down payment that they could bring. We weren't asking very much. We were kind of burned by this property, so we just wanted to move it. So we accepted $7,000 down and a $140,000 sales price. So that's a 5% down payment, which if you are going to sell on seller financing, that's a small percentage for a down payment. Typically, we're gunning for 10% or higher. So their remaining balance was $133,000 after the down payment at a 9.91 interest rate. Pretty good interest rate that we got on this particular property. Their monthly payments, PITI in total, are $1,300 a month. This yields us about $500 of cash flow. And this is simply the difference between what we receive for a monthly payment and what we pay for a monthly payment. Technically, it's just the difference between our P&I, principal and interest, and their P&I. Taxes and insurance adjust since it's seller financing, and the end buyer ultimately pays those. We did pay some realtor commissions, a listing commission, since this was a remote deal and we wanted to use a realtor. No prepayment penalty, no balloons, and just a 30-year term. So those were the terms on which we sold the property on a contract for deed, or a land contract, as sometimes it's called. Now, we had a few other costs that I want to take into account here before we get to the total numbers, but we did have a little bit of rehab cost, and I think I actually have a tab where it breaks down what our rehab costs actually were. And I lumped all this stuff in and just called it rehab. We actually got a property inspection since we were at a distance and had never purchased a mobile home before. We actually gave a payment to the squatter, a cash for keys payment, to just get them out of the property. So that's what that number is, just a little under $525. We had a contact who lived kind of close to the property, and this individual would come up to some of our rehab projects and do some landscaping. And so they were okay actually traveling down to the property to do some haul out type work. And so we paid them $360 for that, $200 for lawn care, $160 for cleaning. So all in on our rehab cost or just other expenses, $1,700. Now over here, I got property tax, insurance. That all goes in the deal evaluator when you're plugging in the numbers on this first tab down here so that it can accurately spit out our PITI. And then we had some utility bills as well. So what ended up happening on the numbers on this deal? Well, our front end profit ended up being positive, actually. We made something on this deal despite the nightmare of the squatter situation that we had. We collected $7,000 for a down payment. However, we had our closing costs of about $1,100. We had these other expenses like rehab expenses, cleaning, inspection, which was $1,700. And then I'd say we had about 3 months of holding costs. So I'm just going to lump that in there, and you can see my formula up here at the top. Sometimes in the past, I never calculated my holding costs in the total profitability of a deal, but nowadays I definitely am, and I'm projecting for at least 6 months holding cost on a very conservative estimate, even though most deals only take us a month or two to move them, either rent them out or owner finance them. So we actually came out ahead on the front end profit of this deal. We came out $1,703. We came out $1,703 positive cash in the bank account after all was said and done. Oh, wait, I forgot to include that realtor cost. Dang it, minus $3,500. We came out negative. Okay. Well, my bad. We came out negative on our front end, so we actually had cash invested in this deal of $1,797. Sometimes that happens, guys, but it was a phenomenal cash on cash return, so totally worth it. As stated a second ago, our cash flow, our monthly cash flow on this deal is about $500 a month, and because this is seller financing, that number should never change. It will never change as long as our buyer remains the buyer and continues making their payment every single month. And our back end expected cash out, if our buyer goes to sell or refinance the property or pay it off in cash, at month 1 would be $8,773. So that number right here, this number, the $8,773, it says back end, that really depends on at what point this deal comes to a conclusion, because our subject to loan has one amortization table that began back in 2018. However, our buyer has an amortization table that began back at the very end of 2022. And so the principal paydown is way ahead on our subject to loan, and their principal paydown is behind. Plus the loan balances to begin with are different. And so the back end spread on these deals really is calculated just by comparing the two amortization tables. So if you take a look after the very first month of this deal, if the buyer were to have turned around and just paid the property off with cash, then we would have only made a profit of $12,495. Now let me just correct this. This doesn't account for that $5,000 partial claim that we'd have to pay. So I'd have to subtract $5,000 from this back end profit column right here. So the grand profitability on the deal would only have been $7,495. I'm just taking this number and subtracting $5,000 from it. Now, since when you sell on seller financing, we're expecting our buyer to be in the property for a good amount of time, on average 10, 11, 12, 13 years. We just take a 10-year benchmark for our overall profitability, but we're expecting them to be in there for some time. And if they ever do want to sell, well, then we will be the first ones to give them an offer to see if we can buy that property back, keep the good debt on the property, and then do it all over again. So you can see right here that the front end profit always remains the same. The front end profit is always the front end profit. The cash flow amount every single month is always the cash flow amount, just about $500. However, as time goes on, each month of cash flow just gets added to the next month of cash flow every single month. So that number is continually going up as this deal goes on into perpetuity. And then our back end profit. Again, you're going to have to keep in mind that we would subtract $5,000 from this number here. But off the bat, it's $13,000 minus 5. But then notice how this back end profit goes up. And throughout the years, for the majority of the loan, this back end profit is actually increasing over time. Again, because our amortization on the subject to loan is way ahead, I think about 5 years ahead of our buyer's amortization, which means our principal paydown is happening faster than their principal paydown is. So this back end spread actually goes up over time. So after 1 year of this deal, we would net $20,232 minus $5,000. So about 15 grand. After, let's say, 5 years of this deal, if this deal only went for 5 years, we would have netted $50,945 minus $5,000, so about $45,000. Now, again, we expect these deals to run for approximately 10 years, which is a nice round benchmark. So we take a look at the 120-month profitability. Okay, I lied. I think I said 100 grand at the beginning of this video. Closer to 85 if it goes for only 10 years. But still, that's a good profit on a house with very little equity, to which we did very little work. If this deal goes for 10 years, then we'll have netted, we're going to subtract $5,000 from that number, $85,469. We'll always be negative on the front end, can never change that, but our cash flow would have been about $59,000 over that period of time. And what that is specifically is interest income on our loan to our end buyer. And then we have our back end spread. That is the exciting thing. I love looking at this tab in particular. It tells you whether a deal is worth pursuing, regardless of what the interest rate is on the underlying loan. If you're only looking at 2 and 3% sub-2 deals, maybe 4% sub-2 deals, but aren't considering 5, 6, and 7s, I know 7's starting to get a little bit high, but you really need to plug the deal into a software in order to see the grand profitability on these deals over time. Now, how has this deal actually been working for us in real life? Well, it's been going really well. Our buyer pays us on time every single month. We don't hear from them ever. There's really no reason for us to hear from them except for at the end of the year, issuing them some statements and whatnot. But this was a great stepping stone. I think a lot of these early deals were a great stepping stone toward building a portfolio, which would enable me to, support my family, continue to invest in real estate and do deals. And I learned a lot from this particular deal on how to do deals virtually, or how not to do deals virtually, at least. And we may not have been perfect on it, but at least we were taking action. At least we were out there hitting the ground, buying houses, moving houses, and learning from the experience so that we could do it better the next time. If you found this video inspiring, helpful in some way, please do me a favor and like the video, leave a comment. Let me know what you would like me to talk about in future videos. If you haven't checked out my website, sub2investor.com, a lot of good stuff on there for you, free purchase contract. The deal evaluator is available there too. Until next time, stay creative. Peace.